This is Dr. Toby Capwell, curator, author, historical advisor, and all-round expert on historical arms and armour. And I'm your host, Dave Jewett, and today we're getting down and dirty and breaking down a night of the Seven Kingdoms.
It's a common thing in films to see the knight stood there and then he gets his horse going and he's galloping along with his lance lowered in the horizontal position. And this is just not how you do this. This kind of grappling is well documented in real trials by combat. Nothing wrong with this at all. So with the antlers, is he a Baratheon then? See, I know something about this.
There is a longer, deeper, extended edition of this episode over on our Patreon, link in the description below for that. And while you're down there, you'll also find a link to Toby's fantastic book, An Armourer's Album. Now, we hope you enjoyed the episode, and without further ado, it's over to Toby.
Fits my grip as well as it ever fit his.
He was started as a squire for a Hedge Knight. Were Hedge Knights real things, like poor knights?
Well, I mean, Hedge Knight is a made-up term that I've not heard before. But I guess we could say that the social group of people who fought in full plate armor and are armed and trained to fight in the manner of a knight was a more diverse group of people than we often imagine. Popular imagination often conjures an image of the medieval period as a world polarized between the wealthy and the poor, with not a lot in between. You know, essentially two classes of people, very different from each other. But that's not what real late medieval society was actually like. It was a much more diverse place. There were wealthier knights and poorer knights. I wouldn't say any knights were poor exactly, but of more modest means than some great noblemen, of course. But there were also men who fought in full plate armor and who you would look at and you might superficially think that's a knight when he's not a knight. Plenty of, let's call them men-at-arms. The man-at-arms is the catch-all term for anybody who wears full plate armor and is trained to fight on a horse as well as on foot with the knightly weapons. So all knights are men-at-arms, but not all men-at-arms are knights, if you see what I mean.
This guy's very poor, and they say referred to as hedge knights because they often can't afford accommodation and will sleep under a hedge.
It's important not to lean too far into the poorness, because having horses, having armor, you need a certain number of staff to help make that system work. You're not exactly homeless. If you're taking the homeless, poor, impoverished aspect to extremes, then it's probably departing from reality.
By law, only a true-born son is entitled to inherit a knight's arms. You must needs find a new device, sir.
See, there's some concern with pedigree.
And being told that you're not allowed to fight under that crest or coat of arms because that's a bloodline thing.
Yeah, I mean, there were legal cases fought over the right to carry certain coats of arms. There's one that I'm dealing with at the moment, the case of Rafe Green and Sir Edward Dallingrig in the very beginning of the 15th century. These are two knights, one knight and an esquire who's Armigerous, both on campaign with King Henry IV in Wales. And they discovered that they're both wearing the same coat of arms, which is a white field with a red engrailed cross. So it looks just like the coat of arms of St. George, or the English flag, except that the edges of the cross are engrailed with points, cusped, and they both are wearing it. And that can't be allowed. The king is asked to arbitrate, and it gets to the point where they nearly fight a judicial duel over who gets to wear this engrailed cross. That's an example of where the coats of arms are, taken very seriously, because it's basically you writing your name and your lineage on your shield in pictures and colors. And if you're wearing someone else's coat of arms, you're claiming to be them, or you're at least creating confusion over something as central as a knight's identity. So the coats of arms are serious business.
This is him commissioning an artist for his own heraldry and later some armour.
So his device is a pair of wings on a chalice.
That's his old lord's device. The knight that he previously served, that's his heraldry. So he's asking for his own new one now.
Your rim was old. Cheap steel.
One thing just to note about heraldry, it uses symbols, obviously, but the modern mind tends to want symbols to mean something. And a coat of arms seems personal, deeply personal. It's your identity, it's you painted on the shield, right? In my experience in the jousting world over the last 30 years, we use heraldry for the reasons that it was intended for. We need to be able to tell who's who when there's, 10 or 12 guys in armor on the field. But when modern people are thinking, right, I need a coat of arms, they often make the mistake of getting too personal about it and thinking, well, I have Scottish ancestry, so I'm going to have a thistle, and then I'm fond of my cat, so I'm going to put cats on it as well. And I like the color purple, so I'm going to make it purple and pink. They're putting all this personal stuff into it at the same time as not realizing that heraldry actually has very strict rules and regulations. It's a visual language, but it has grammar, it has vocabulary, it has sentence structure, and you create these things that look nothing like a real medieval coat of arms. And real medieval coat of arms could make kind of quite clever personal references, but they're mainly there to be easily recognizable and distinctive from hundreds of feet away. Because you've got to be able to look across the field and say, that's Steve, or whatever. And if it's a stag rampant with a crown around its neck and 20 tiered antlers and a chain wrapped around it, and then the background is checkerboarded, it's going to look like a mess from 500 feet away. So I like heraldry that looks like real heraldry.
It needs to be practical.
And does its job and is easy to reproduce, because you got to paint it on shields, you've got to embroider it on stuff, you need to paint it on boxes and banners. And so mine's fairly simple and not in any way personal. But people always ask me, what does it mean? What's the significance of it? And the significance of it is that you can tell what it is from a mile away. That's what the significance is. The elm tree and a shooting star, you're not going to be able to see what that is. Who cares? It's a device for recognition. It's not a painting to be hung in an art gallery or something,
If you want an even deeper dive into a Knight of the Seven Kingdoms, then check out our Patreon. Over there you can find the director's cut of this episode, but also over 85 extended director's cut episodes from a variety of experts, and even more Patreon exclusive content and EXP Discord access. Becoming an EXP patron helps to support the channel and allows us to bring on our wonderful experts. But whether you watch long on YouTube or join the Patreon, I want to say thank you for being part of this journey, and now I'll get back to the video.
I like seeing this happening at night. I don't know whether the writer here knew this or not, but nighttime jousting was real. There are accounts of jousts held by torchlight at nighttime. They're getting confused here now between a joust at the tilt and a tournament. They appear to have multiple tilts set up. Tilt is the barrier that you run down to avoid a collision. Tilts were only ever used in one-on-one contests. You don't set up loads of tilts so that loads of people can all run at the same time. That was, as far as I can tell, invented in the 20th century, possibly invented for the film Ivanhoe with Robert Taylor, 1953 or something. Who knows if the idea of multiple tilts predates that or not, but I can't think of it earlier than 1950 something. In reality, if you're having teams of horsemen charge each other en masse, like 3 versus 3 or 10 versus 10 or whatever you want, that's done in the open field. And a lot of jousting was still done without tilts all the way through the late Middle Ages and into the Renaissance. Those are so-called jousts of war. Jousts run in the equipment of war in a warlike context. Whereas the tilt is used in jousts of peace in a peaceful environment where more safety precautions are allowable because you're holding a joust in a friendly environment to celebrate a wedding or a diplomatic occasion or something like that, where, jousts of war would be inappropriate for whatever reason. That is not good enough face protection. That helmet is not going to do the job it needs to do if he is going to run with lances.
But in this and across Game of Thrones and other fiction, really, when someone of noble blood or from the royal family takes to a field like this, I've often had the sense that the opponent is like, well, I should really sort of throw this or avoid direct contact because that's the royal family. Is that something that might have happened through history, that two people come to joust, one's much higher status, the other would think, I'm probably going to hold back a bit because he's of much higher status? Would they engage on equal terms?
Again, as usual, it depends. Some great noblemen and even kings, King Henry VIII is an obvious example, but not the only one. The Emperor Maximilian in the early 16th century, late 15th, early 16th century would be another one. In the case of monarchs or high-ranking noblemen who were jousting connoisseurs, they would be very upset if anybody pulled their punches against them. So if you're jousting against someone who cares about the quality of the jousting and is good at it themselves, they will expect you to do your best against them. But there are other cases where clearly it's not the case. I found there's a Spanish jousting treatise from the end of the 15th century written by someone named Ponce de Meneguera, who was a Valencian knight, who wrote a jousting treatise in the 1490s. He goes through all the ways of scoring and judging a joust before saying, but if you are jousting against a prince or a king, he wins automatically in deference to his status. So you might joust seriously against him, but he's still going to win because he's the king. And some kings would accept that, and some kings wouldn't. Henry VIII allowed someone else to be declared the winner at his Westminster joust in 1511, for example. The scorecards survive. So you can see that Henry didn't enforce the royal right to win automatically. So it depends who you're dealing with, and it depends on the situation. Let's just stop for a second and say a word or two about lance technique. What you just saw was people who have no idea how to handle lances like knights and have never heard of a thing called lance technique or lance control. It's a common thing in films to see the knight stood there and then he gets his horse going and he's galloping along with his lance lowered in the horizontal position. And this is just not how you do this. If you bother to crack a book and read anything about real jousting, the technique is very clear. Your lance is never horizontal except at the moment of impact. When you're beginning a run, the first and most important thing is that you get your horse going and running well. The horse is on the right lead, he's running down the tilt well, you get your speed up, you're going well. Then your lance comes up to the prepared position. If you're using a lance rest, as they should be, but they're not, the lance rest is here on your breastplate. It's sitting against the graper, the stop on the lance. And then you're approaching your opponent and you're watching him. And as you're approaching, the lance starts to come down. Poco y poco, little by little. So the lance is coming down and it's only level when you strike your opponent. And then it comes straight back up again. Even if you break on the opponent, whatever bit of the lance that remains in your hand moves back up to the vertical, and then you stop the horse at the end. You're not just careering down the field, waving this lance around, hitting something, throwing this around, and then crashing into something at the end. There's a lot of technique and a lot of dignity and training. They're all yelling and running around. They're trying to make it exciting. And running around panicky, slapping horses in the ass and running all over the place is not really how to make it work.
I think that helmet has the same emo haircut that I had as a teenager. Pretty sure I had red tips through my hair.
It's kind of a shame because, you know, the Targaryens are supposed to have all this dragon imagery, right? There's a lot of real dragon armor that survives. Armor decorated with dragon motifs is a real thing, predominantly from the middle of the 16th century, but in depictions of St. George, who again is a dragon slayer, the hunter takes on the identity of his prey, right? So in a lot of art, it has specifically depictions of St. George in Italian art, even in the 15th century, his armor becomes very dragon-like sometimes. And if you wanted to make dragon armor for a fantasy movie, there's loads of really amazing historical stuff to take inspiration from. That's one good way of never having any kind of respect ever again. You don't dodge in jousts, and you certainly don't carry your lance that low and kill someone's horse in a joust. Game of Thrones is especially visceral and scary and whatever, but no, you don't. Horses did get injured by accident, but the idea of doing it on purpose in a formal combat like this is kind of ridiculous.
Well, the crowd doesn't approve, and his character's meant to be especially horrid and slimy.
Yeah, okay. Well, as a character thing and a made-up story, I guess. And you could consider that a kind of PR disaster. Actually, that precise injury of a horse getting struck through the neck did happen at the Passo on Rosso. It's documented in the account that I'm working on. It happened as an accident. And it says the horse was struck in the neck and it passed straight through to the other side. Then they say nothing else about it. They don't tell you that the horse died. Nobody remarks on it at all. It's just quietly put away.
So this is coming to the sort of climax of the series, the Trial of the Seven. So it's a trial by combat. The Targaryen you saw skewer a horse earlier, our main character beats him up because he was acting dishonorably, and he demanded a trial by combat, and the Targaryen retorted that, well, there's an ancient trial by combat where it's 7v7 to represent 7 gods.
Yeah.
Each character's had to get together a gang.
Yeah, that's a kosher idea. The obvious one that I can think of historically during the 100 Years' War was the famous combat of the 30, which was actually the combat of 60, because it was 2 teams of 30 fighting a kind of massive judicial combat.
Well, this is 2 teams of 7.
Yeah, that's absolutely fine. That's an acceptable knightly medieval thing to do. If George R.R. Martin wrote this, or wrote the book that it's based on, he's well known as, deriving a lot of his plot elements and concepts and, social dynamics from real history. So he will have done his homework. It's just a question of whether, as usual, is the production design and stunt performance up to the quality of the story. I think viewers should demand that it is, if it's a good story that they care about.
So he's called Sir Duncan the Tall. How would his size and stature benefit or hinder him in jousts or foot combat? Because jockeys are meant to be short, but in jousting, is it more beneficial?
No, size is a factor, sure. And size is a factor in any martial art. If you're bigger and stronger than your opponent, it's kind of undeniable that that's an advantage. Your smaller, weaker opponent might still be able to beat you with sheer skill and attitude, but it doesn't deny that size and strength is a serious advantage. It's no getting away from it. And in a joust, your total mass matters too. You need to get a horse that's of an appropriate size for the rider. So a bigger guy needs a bigger horse. But, facing a big guy on a big horse in the joust is a serious thing. This is a bit more like a video game, where in video games commonly you start with low status mail armor and you work your way up to upgrade to great plate armor. having the 13th century and the 16th century coexisting in one period for the sake of player satisfaction. In reality, it didn't really ever work like that. You'd never have guys in plate armor like this fighting in a tournament against someone wearing 13th century armor of mail. This is again how modern media is sort of bleeding into itself.
So one of the things that's left up for debate that's never fully addressed is whether or not his knight did knight him. Which is
Has
why
he got some fundamental dishonesty at the heart of his identity?
Yeah, he says in the books, he says, I've been living this great lie, and it never actually says if it's, I've been pretending to be a knight. But that's why I think he hesitates to knight someone else, because it would then force that person to live a lie.
The knight with imposter anxiety?
Yeah.
Is that what we're talking, with imposter syndrome?
Or is he a knight? Is he an imposter?
Generally, if you suffer from imposter anxiety, you're the genuine article. If you're an imposter, you don't suffer from imposter anxiety.
But the other books other characters describe him as having some of the most chivalrous knightly qualities of a man they've ever met. But was he ever officially knighted? Does that matter?
Well, those are good questions. Where does the power, the honor, the strength originate from? Maybe it doesn't come from your genetics. That's, again, an interesting question. It might not be the one that medieval people would ask, but in the modern world, for the modern mind, it's an interesting question.
My helm, if you please.
This is the apple tree knight here.
Yeah, so it was amusing that the house that had cider distilleries and orchards, his armor's absolutely covered in apples.
So with the antlers, is he a Baratheon then? See, I know something about this. I watched the old show at some point in the distant past.
So here we see another character. That's his son's armor. You mentioned people borrowing armor earlier. Would individuals lending armor to each other, there'd need to be of at least similar stature for it to fit somewhat well? Or would there be more tailored armor if you're of high status that was really true to your body?
Yeah, it's all about who you are and how much money you have to spend. There was plenty of off-the-peg armor in the real Middle Ages. There's plenty of armor that was mass-produced in large numbers, essentially in small, medium, and large. And then there's the absolute custom tailor-made armor that is fitted to a much greater degree. There's a difference between what will get the job done and what will work really well. So this is, just to be clear, in the context of the story, this is now like a deed of arms at war. They're accepting that death might result from this.
Yes.
And it's important to distinguish that from tournaments. There's often a lot of confusion about the difference between tournaments and jousts of peace and deeds of arms to the death or judicial combats that are really quite different things. Is this a judicial procedure in the story? Do they have some point
Yes.
a disagreement that they're trying to address?
So Duncan basically gave a Targaryen a mean right hook because he was being a bit of a slime ball. And they were like, you can't do that. It's the noble family. You assaulted a member of the ruling family. So he was like, well, you were assaulting someone. I'm, as a knight, was acting to defend the innocent as my oath. I was upholding my own oath. So they accused him of just the assault. And he said, well, I demand a trial by combat. And the trial of the seven was then brought up by the Targaryen. And it's seen as the winners. The gods will favor the winner of the winning team, and we will go with what the gods believe. You are proven innocent by your victory. The joust was over quickly. It's quickly devolved into a melee.
Yeah, and in a judicial combat, anything goes. This kind of grappling is well documented in real trials by combat. Nothing wrong with this at all. I mean, I don't see why they would fight in mud puddles, but taking it to grappling on the ground is perfectly fine. And in the combat of the 30, they started on foot. The combat of the 30 was 30 versus 30 on foot. But the crucial point in that kind of formal battle was when one of the French or the French allied knights got on a horse and broke the English allied formation on his horse. So this kind of mixed infantry versus cavalry, or mounted people fighting people that have become dismounted, in this context is fine too, but wouldn't be fine in a tournament or a joust, which is a very closely defined style of combat. I'm pleased to see that at least the bad guy has kept his helmet on for longer than you might have expected a lead actor to keep his helmet on. The helmets have stayed on longer than normal, and I appreciate that. I mean, he found an excuse to take his helmet off, of course, but he kept it on for a reasonable amount of time. It's not like they threw it off after the first charge and shook their hair out as per normal. And also, we passed it, but there's a bit where he stabbed him on the inside of the leg. You know, when you're fighting someone in armor, stab them where the armor isn't. Don't try to get through the strongest part of their defenses. Stab them where the armor isn't. A lot of armored fighting technique is about that. Find the gaps. Stab them in the voids. So there's some of that happening, which is nice. I mean, the voids are even more vulnerable here because they're not wearing anything in them, where they might be advised to cover those with mail.
There's been a few times where the Targaryens managed to stab Sir Duncan through the mail, but you can see that it doesn't go super deep. His strength has pushed it through, but the mail has prevented it from going all the way.
So it did its job. Armor doesn't have to confer invulnerability. Armor just has to be better than not wearing it and be worth the cost of wearing it, the physical cost of wearing it. Is it better than not having it? Yes or no?
He is very clearly gutted. He has to keep fighting. He knows he's not got a great shot.
A good pinning with the knee. Armored grappling, pinning with the knees is important because you have to keep your hands free, obviously.
At least he wants to yield. I withdraw my accusation.
Yeah, in a real trial by combat, that's not allowed.
It's to the death.
Once you go, it's to the death. And if somebody loses, but they're not killed, they're just taken out and hung. One way or another, someone's finishing off dead, and that gives you the legal closure you desired.
Your Grace, I am your man.
Your Grace, your armor would look a lot better with a different helmet. In so many ways, you know, the helmet makes the armor. That's something I always tell younger guys who are just getting into this and they're wondering how much money to spend on an armor. If you're trying to put together an armor with, you know, on a budget, I always say spend as much money as you possibly can on the helmet, because a really good helmet is not only important for protecting important parts of your anatomy, it also makes the armor. It's the ultimate focal point. You can have a fairly modest looking armor, and if it's got a great helmet, the whole thing looks great. But if you have a fabulous armor and a terrible helmet, the whole thing looks terrible.
Not to spoil anything, but His Grace might have wished he had a different helmet, because the helmet couldn't stop that mace. When we were fighting with maces and poleaxes and warhammers, would it be common for the helmet to be crushed into the skull?
No.
The force transfer
No.
or pierce?
No, a helmet is designed specifically to protect you against that. And that's what it does. You do not kill a knight by hitting him in the head with a mace. There are cases of knights being, as it's described, beaten to death inside their armors. But that's, you know, by 6 or 8 Scotsmen with big hammers, irate because you've just disturbed their golf game, as happened at the Battle of Beaujeu in 1421 to the Duke of Clarence, was beaten to death inside his armor by irate Scotsmen. But that's extreme, you know. I mean, the equipment, the helmet is one of the heaviest parts of your equipment. The helmet skull is like 3 or 4 millimeters thick, at least. And, you know, the shape of it gives room for the padding, but also there's air in there. You know, in the cranium of my helmet, there's air between the padding and me. There's a suspension lining in there. Every armor can be compromised. Of course, there's no such thing as total invulnerability. But, you know, if your armor is made well, you're a high-ranking nobleman and you've afforded good equipment, then your head should be one of the safest parts of your body. effective anti-armor fighting is about getting between the plates, not straight through the thickest part of them.
Why would the gods take him and leave you?
I've wondered the same.
That is Knight of the Seven Kingdoms. Anything final to add?
I can see that there's some good storytelling in there. And I can see that the original writer did some serious homework and took some inspiration from real stuff, as is always the case with Game of Thrones written by the original author, as opposed to not. Here, it has some medieval soul, and I don't have to watch the whole program to see that that's the case. I'm encouraged. I didn't watch this originally because I just thought, I don't need any more opportunities to upset myself. But it looks interesting enough to maybe I'll check it out and inform myself better, since I'm in public pontificating about it. Maybe there's now a moral obligation to give it the benefit of the doubt and watch it properly. It gives me the sense that it might be worth doing. There's some of the usual modern stereotypical stuff. I'd like to see a greater awareness of real knightly martial arts, both on foot and on horseback, in the film and TV world when they are deciding to portray this subject. You can say, oh, well, who cares? It's fantasy. Well, you still care about the cinematography. You still expect the sound man to do his job. Let's expect the same of the design and the performance, the action performance.
I really enjoyed A Knight of the Seven Kingdoms more than I did a good amount of the original Game of Thrones series. It's been a long time since I've enjoyed a Game of Thrones product as much as I enjoyed this.
I could do without all the running around and screaming and yelling. Doing stuff on horses is hard enough without running around panicking and taking your dignity and throwing it in the bin. Knights were people who were obsessed with their personal dignity and respect. Every aspect of their lives was about carrying themselves well, with dignity and composure and control. It was running around screaming at people. It's just very undignified and unknightly. So good job, George R.R. Martin, in reading some medieval literature. I know you did it somewhere. Let's keep going. Let's push on with that and keep going and see that reality can make our fantasy work better.
Thank you all for watching. Let us know what you thought of the episode down in the comments section below. Like the video if you enjoyed, and of course, subscribe. As always, a huge shout out to all of our wonderful supporters over on the Patreon, without whom we simply couldn't make full content like this. We hope to see you in the next video, but until then, thank you so much for watching.